Here, we'll begin working with some basic shapes. Shapes that we create are composed of anchor points with paths connecting the anchor points. A basic square is composed of 4 anchor points on the corners with paths connecting those anchor points. We'll begin by creating a bowl from a few rectangles that will contain some fruit. First, I'll get the rectangle tool in the Tools panel. And I'll move the pointer into the artboard. I'll press the mouse button down and drag down and to the right to create a rectangle that is taller than it is wide. And then I'll release the mouse button. We don't have to worry about the size just now. And now I'll move the pointer over the small blue dot in the center of the rectangle. And when the pointer changes to a black arrow with a little square by it, that means we can move it around the artboard. And I'll move it towards the bottom of the artboard. Now, with the rectangle still selected, I'm going to click somewhere else on the artboard to open up the rectangle dialog box. And I'm going to change the width to 1 inch and the height to 0.1 inches. And that will create a new rectangle specifically to that size. And I'll click OK. So there's another way to create a rectangle. If we know exactly how large we want the rectangle to be, we can just use the rectangle tool to click somewhere in the document and enter the values that we want. And now I'll just drag that rectangle down using the center widget there so that it's approximately centered below that first rectangle. So now we'll make some changes to our rectangles. I'll get my selection tool from the toolbar, and I'll click in the first rectangle to select it. I'll move the pointer over the middle point on the top of the rectangle and drag up to make it taller. When you see the pointer, change to a double-headed arrow, just click, hold, and drag up. You can also press Alt or Option on your keyboard, and that will change the height from both ends. So I'm going to click, hold, and drag up, and I'm going to drag it up to about 3 inches. You see the little widget to the right, the gray area tells me my height and width. So there it's approximately 3 inches high. Now I want to rotate this rectangle, so with my selection tool still in use, I'm going to hover it over the upper right corner until I see it change to a double arrow curved icon. I'll hold down my Shift key to constrain it to 45-degree angles until it is now horizontally oriented. So with the rectangle selected, I'll open up my Properties panel. And in the Transform area, I want to make sure that the height and width are linked. So I want to click on that icon to change it to a linked chain. And I'm going to change the height value only to 0.75. And by clicking that chain link, that will change the width proportionally with the height of 0.75. So now we can see how it's changed the height and the width. Now by default, shapes are filled with a white color and have a black stroke, which is known as the border. We're going to change that on this rectangle. So in the appearance area, I'm going to click that Fill color box to bring up the swatches panel, and I'll just choose a dark brown color. Or you can choose any color you like. But one of those dark brown colors will be fine. And you can see it's changed the fill of that color. I'll press the Escape key to get rid of the swatches panel, and I'll click the Stroke color box. Now here we don't want a stroke, so I'll click that white square with the red diagonal line across it. That means no stroke, and that removed the stroke. And I'll press the Escape key to close the swatches panel. And then with my selection tool, I'll just click away from the object somewhere to deselect it. Now, after we've created our rectangle, we can change the appearance of it by rounding the rectangle. I'm going to zoom in on that smaller rectangle so we can see it better. I'll switch to my selection tool. So I've zoomed in and up there. Now I want to switch to my selection tool. And now I can see these little widgets inside the rectangle. And if I click, hold, and drag one of those widgets in, it will round the corners. So I'll click on one of those widgets and just drag in, and that rounds the corners of the rectangle. Now, in the Properties panel, I'm going to click the More Options in the Transform section. Those are those three dots in the lower right-hand corner. And I'm going to make sure that the link quarter radius values is on, so it looks like a linked chain. And I'll click the up arrow for any of the radius values as many times as I can until it doesn't change anymore. So this is another way to change the radius of the corners. Now we can change the corner type as well. So just to the left of the value is a little corner icon. And I can click the drop-down menu, and there are a few choices there. I'll change it to a chamfer. You can see how it changes. However, I really only want to change the bottom corners to chamfer, the left and right bottom corners. So I'll click that drop-down menu and choose chamfer for the left and right bottom corners. I'll go back to that top left one, change it back to just the regular round, and then I'll go to the bottom right corner and change that to a chamfer corner. Now we want to change the color of our rectangle. So I'll click that More Options little button or just press the Escape key to close this part of the Properties panel. And I'll go to the Fill, click the color box, and I'll change it to some dark brown color. I'll press the Escape key to close the Swatches panel, click the Stroke color, and I'll change that to None. And I'll press the Escape key to close the Swatches panel. And with the Selection tool, I'll just click away from that rectangle to deselect it. Now, I'm going to select the larger rectangle, and I'll switch to the Direct Selection tool. That's the white arrow key. And I'll double-click the left bottom corner widget. That brings up a dialog box. And I'll just change the radius to the largest, the highest value radius. So I'll just click the up button on the radius field and just click that as many times as I can until it stops increasing in value. And I'll click OK. And notice that left corner was the only one that changed. And I'll double click on the lower right corner radius widget and do the same thing. Just increase the value of the radius to its highest value. And now I'll get my Selection tool, click in the large rectangle and move it down on top of that little base. And so it's centered there. So there's a little bit about creating rectangles and editing them, changing the corner radius, and the fill and stroke colors.